Hello and welcome to Narayana Education Institutions. I am Rajshekhar Reddy, Faculty for Current Affairs. In this lecture, I will be analyzing the Hindu newspaper which was published on the 6th of September. The most important topics covered in the newspaper are Goods and Services Tax, Ease of Doing Business Index and Novichok. So, these three topics will be covered in detail in today's lecture. So, let us start with the first topic for today's class, that is the Goods and Services Tax. This is a very important topic, not just for the prelims examination but also for the mains examination. This has created a huge sensation in our country, especially in the recent period. So, what is Goods and Services Tax? What are the various features of the Goods and Services Tax, and what is the controversy that has been created in the recent period? So, we need to analyze the Goods and Services Tax, its history and various features. So, let us see when was the Goods and Services Tax introduced. So, Goods and Services Tax was introduced by the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act, which was enacted in the year 2016. So, this was introduced by means of a constitutional amendment which was enacted in the year 2016. This was launched on 1st of July 2017. So, this tax was launched all over India on the 1st of July 2017. Goods and Services Tax is an indirect tax. So, taxes are of two types. One is direct tax and the other is indirect tax. Goods and Services Tax is an indirect tax and it has absorbed. So, it has absorbed a number of indirect taxes. So, it has absorbed a number of indirect taxes which include VAT, services tax, central excise, entertainment tax, and others. So, there are a number of taxes which have been absorbed by the Goods and Services Tax. This has been done by means of a constitutional amendment, which means that the states have accepted to forego. So, states have accepted to forego the right to impose these indirect taxes. So, some of these indirect taxes are levied by the states. They have given up their right to impose these taxes and they have given the right to impose these taxes to an organization called GST Council. So, GST Council is the organization which will impose these taxes from now onwards. GST Council is comprised of both the center and all the states. So, it is a body comprising of the finance ministers of both the central government as well as the states. But what is this GST? So, as I have already told you, GST stands for Goods and Services Tax and it is an indirect tax, and most importantly it is a destination based tax. Destination based tax. What do you mean by a destination based tax? A destination based tax is a tax that is given to the state where a particular product is consumed. For example, a product is produced in state A and is consumed in state B. The GST that is collected on this particular product will be shared between the central government and the state government, that is state B. It will not be given to state A where the product has been produced. It will be given to state B where the product has been consumed. So, this is a very important tax measure which has been introduced in 2016. So, some states, especially Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Maharashtra and others, have objected to the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax on the ground that they will lose revenue. So, they will be losing revenue and this revenue loss must be compensated. So, they have objected to the introduction of this particular tax on the ground that they will be losing revenue. So, the central government has done one important thing. They have said that they will be compensating. So, they will compensate any loss that the states will face following the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax. So, following the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax, if there is any loss created to the states, that loss will be given back to the states. So, this is a very important feature that has been incorporated in a particular act of the parliament called GST Compensation to States Act. So, there is an act which was enacted which is called GST Compensation to States Act, which was enacted in 2017, and the primary purpose of this act is to ensure that the states do not see any shortfall in the revenue. So, this is something which is very important. So, if for example, Tamil Nadu state collects a revenue of 100 crores through indirect taxes, and if following the introduction of GST, if they collect only 60 crores, then the remaining 40 crores plus 14% additional amount will be given to Tamil Nadu by the central government. So, this is a very, very important thing which has been done by the central government. They have introduced the GST Compensation to States Act, and this act has guaranteed compensation to the states. Now, what happened is, because of COVID-19, the economy of our country was affected significantly. The Indian economy was affected significantly, and as a result, the GST revenue collection will see a significant fall. So, the amount of money that will be collected in the form of GST will reduce significantly. The central government estimates that the amount of shortfall will be 3 lakh crores. So, there will be a shortfall of as much as 3 lakh crores caused by the introduction and COVID-19, introduction of GST and COVID-19. Out of this 3 lakh crores, 65,000 crores will be collected in the form of a cess which is called GST compensation cess, that is also called GST cess. GST cess will be imposed on some particular products. We will be seeing the list of products on which GST cess is collected. So, GST cess will be collected, and this will be 65,000 crores, and the remaining 2,35,000 crores must be given to the states. Now, here comes the problem. So, how will the central government compensate the states as far as this 2,35,000 is concerned? So, we will be looking at the options that are provided by the central government to various states as far as filling the gap that has been created following the introduction of GST is concerned. So, let me clearly tell you once again what is GST. So, Goods and Services Tax was launched on 1st of July 2017. It is an indirect tax. As I have already told you, it is an indirect tax. It is replacing a number of other taxes like excise duty, VAT, service tax, etc. So, it has replaced a number of taxes which include excise duty, VAT, service tax. GST is charged at the time of supply and depends on the destination of consumption. So, it is charged at the time of supply, and as I have told you, it will be collected by the state where it has been consumed. For example, if a good is manufactured in state A but consumed in state B, then the revenue generated through GST collection is credited to the state of consumption, that is state B, and not the state of production. This is something which is very, very important. This GST that is imposed in this case is called IGST, that is the Integrated Goods and Services Tax. For example, if a product is produced in one state, that is A, and it is consumed in the same state A, then what will happen is there will be two types of GSTs that will be levied. One is CGST and the other is SGST. So, the central government will collect 50% of the GST and the state government will get 50%. On the other hand, if a product is produced in state A and is consumed in state B, then we will have IGST, and this will be shared between the center and state B. Okay. Due to the consumption based nature of GST, manufacturing states like Gujarat, Haryana, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu feared revenue loss. Thus, GST compensation cess or GST cess was introduced by the government to compensate for the possible loss of revenue suffered by such manufacturing states. As I have already told you, because of the introduction of GST, if there is any manufacturing loss, that will be compensated by the GST. However, under the existing rules, this compensation cess will be levied only for the first 5 years. This is a very, very important point. So, the cess which will be imposed to fill the gap that arises in revenue will be imposed only for 5 years, that is till 1st of July 2022. Okay? So, this is a very important point that you need to remember. Further, the computation of the shortfall, like how do you calculate the shortfall, is mentioned in section 7 of the GST Compensation to States Act 2017, and it is based on the revenue that is collected in the financial year 2015 and 16. So, the revenue that is collected in the financial year 2015 and 16 will be taken into consideration. So, assume that a particular state has collected 100 crores in the financial year 2015 and 16, 14% will be added to this particular amount. That is, in the next year, if they collect 114 crores, then there will be no issue. but if they collect less than 114 crores, that loss will be compensated by the central government. This is very, very important that you need to remember. So, there will be a formula that is used. So, the amount of money that is collected in the form of taxes in 2015 and 16 will be taken into consideration. 14% will be added to this amount and the exact amount will be calculated, and if the revenue is lower than this amount, then the gap will be filled by the central government. So, this is the primary purpose of the GST compensation cess. So, what are the goods that are attracting GST compensation? So, there are some specific goods which attract GST compensation. We will be looking at the list of goods now. So, these goods include pan masala. Pan masala will attract a GST cess of 60%. Similarly, unmanufactured tobacco with lime tube featuring a brand name, so will attract a GST cess of 65%. Unmanufactured tobacco without lime tube with brand name will attract a GST cess of 71%. Similarly, branded tobacco refuse 61%. So, there are a list of products that are given for which the GST cess is imposed. So, assume that a person is consuming a cigarette. So, on that cigarette he will be paying not just the GST, he will also be paying the cess, and this cess will be used to fund the states. Yes. So, everything is fine. Now, what is the problem with this particular year? So, as I have already told you, there is a list of products. So, these are also the products on which GST cess is imposed. So, what is the problem now? So, for the 2020-2021 financial year, the revenue shortfall has been estimated or anticipated to be 3 lakh crores. As I have already told you, there will be a significant shortfall in the revenue because of COVID-19, and this shortfall is estimated to be around 3 lakh crores. Out of this, 65,000 crores will be collected in the form of cess. So, 65,000 crores will be collected, which means there will be further shortfall of 2,35,000 crores. Here, the central government says that the GST, the shortfall because of the implementation of GST is just 97,000 crores. They say that the shortfall because of the implementation of GST is just 97,000 crores. Even without GST, the states would have incurred a loss of 1,38,000 crores. So, they have come up with a peculiar formula, and they have stated that 97,000 crores is the loss that is caused only by the introduction of GST, and 1,38,000 crores will be incurred by the GST even without the introduction of GST. So, now they will be having two proposals. The states have been given two options. So, states are given two options. So, what are these options? So, option 1. Under option 1, the states are allowed to borrow as much as 97,000 crores. So, the states will be allowed to borrow 97,000 crores. Under option 2, the states will be allowed to borrow 2,35,000 crores. So, under option 1, they will be borrowing 97,000 crores. Under option 2, they will be borrowing 2,35,000 crores. Under this option, the central government will pay both the principal plus interest. So, both the principal plus interest will be paid under this option. Under the second option, the central government will be paying only the principal amount, and the interest component must be paid by the states. So, the states must pay the interest component. So, this is the two proposals which have been put forward by the central government to the states at the 41st meeting of the GST Council. So, at the 41st meeting of the GST Council, these two proposals were made by the center to the states. Then what is the opinion of the states? So, what have the states said? So, as I have already told you, option 1 gives 97,000 crores, under option 2 there is 2,35,000 crores that will be given to the states. So, the 2,35,000 crores is given. So, what is the opinion of the states? So, what have the states said? Several states, especially West Bengal, Kerala, Punjab and Tamil Nadu, have rejected the options. So, they have rejected the options that are given by the central government, and they said this is nothing but an unequivocal commitment given by the government of India to compensate the states for any revenue loss. So, the states say that they have sacrificed their power. So, the states say that they have sacrificed their power to impose taxes and the central government has promised to compensate the states in case of any shortfall. But now the central government is saying that the state should borrow from the market and they will be paying the principal amount. If it is 97,000 crores, then they pay both the principal plus interest, and if it is 2,35,000 crores, they say that they will be paying only the principal amount. This is not liked by the states, especially the states which are ruled by the opposition parties. So they have said that the central government must compensate the states by borrowing. So they say that they should borrow, the central government should borrow, and that money should be given to the states, because they are at the forefront of dealing with COVID-19. So they are dealing with COVID-19. They require money to deal with COVID-19 and they need this money. At the same time, they are also given the responsibility of reviving the economy. This reviving the economy also requires revenue. So the best option according to the states is that the central government should borrow this money and give it to the states. So this is about the GST compensation and the various issues which have arisen out of this GST compensation issue. So as I have already told you, COVID-19 and the various issues that have arisen in the recent period has put a financial stress on the states. So let us move on to the next topic. So the next topic is very, very important for the examination. So they have asked a question in the last year's exam. So this topic is called ease of doing business. So what do you mean by ease of doing business index? What are the various aspects related to this index? So ease of doing business index is one index which is of specific focus by the Government of India. So the Government of India has laid a lot of emphasis on the ease of doing business index. This index is published by the World Bank. So the World Bank publishes this index and it is published annually. So it is published annually by the World Bank. This index is based on 10 parameters. So this index is based on 10 parameters such as starting a business, getting construction permits, getting electricity, etc. So these 10 parameters are used to analyze the business environment which is prevalent in a country. The business environment which is prevalent in a country is analyzed in these 10 parameters and the countries are ranked. So the various countries are ranked here. So the first ranking country in this index is New Zealand. So New Zealand is the country which ranks first in this index. The second, the country which, India's rank in this index is 63. You must remember this rank, which is very, very important. So India's rank in the ease of doing business index is 63. So for any index, you need to follow a specific pattern. So you must know what is a particular index. You must know who publishes that index, that is the publishing organization. You must also know the parameters that are used to formulate that index. You must also know India's rank in that index, and you must know the best ranking country. This is a very, very important topic. So as far as ease of doing business index is concerned, ease of doing business index is an index which measures the business environment which is prevalent in our country. It is published by the World Bank on an annual basis. It has 10 parameters which include starting a business, getting construction permits, getting electricity, resolving insolvency, and etc. So India's rank in this index is 63 and the best ranking country is New Zealand. So now at the state level also there is this index which is created. So in order to promote cooperative federalism and competitive federalism, the finance ministry has released what is called the State Business Reform Action Plan. So State Business Reform Action Plan has been released very recently by the finance minister. This is in the spirit of cooperative federalism and competitive federalism. Cooperative federalism and competitive federalism. So this is a report which is released by the Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade in association with the World Bank. So this is a joint effort of Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, and it is jointly published along with the World Bank. So this is based on as many as 45 business parameters, and the states are ranked. So the states are ranked in this index. So very recently the states have been ranked. So the state which ranks first in India in the ease of doing business index is Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh ranks first. Andhra Pradesh is ranked first for the third consecutive year. So for the past 3 years, Andhra Pradesh is ranked first in this index. Andhra Pradesh is followed by Uttar Pradesh, which has made significant improvement. Last year they were ranked 12th, now they have come to the second place. The third ranking state is Telangana. Telangana is ranked third. So last year they were ranked second, now they are ranked third. So these are the top three states as far as business environment is concerned. So they are the best states as far as doing business is concerned. So this is about the ease of doing business index at the national level as well as the state level. Moving on to the next topic, this is a very important topic for the exam. So there have been a number of questions in the past on this particular topic. So there is a person named Alexei Navalny. Who is this person and why is this person in the news? So this person is in the news because he has been poisoned recently in Russia. So a person has been poisoned recently in Russia. So why is it a big deal? Because this person is a prominent opposition leader in Russia. So he is a fierce critic of Vladimir Putin, who is the president of Russia. So this person has been poisoned by a chemical weapon which is called Novichok. So this is the reason why it is a very important topic. So what is Novichok? What happens when a person is given Novichok? So Novichok is an example of a chemical weapon. So it is a chemical weapon and this person was given Novichok. So it is said that this person was given Novichok while he was traveling from Siberia and he was given Novichok in his tea. Once he took Novichok, he slipped into a coma and he is still in the coma. Okay. So now let us see what is this Novichok and what are the various aspects of Novichok. So Novichok is a potent neurotoxin. What do you mean by a neurotoxin? A neurotoxin is a chemical which affects the nervous system of an individual. So a neurotoxin is a chemical which affects the nervous system of an individual. So it is a neurotoxin developed in the Soviet Union and Russia in the 1980s and 90s that can be delivered as a liquid, powder or aerosol. So this is very important. So this is a chemical weapon which functions as a neurotoxin, which means it affects the nervous system, and it has been developed by the Soviet Union in the 1980s and 90s, and it can be delivered as a liquid, it can be delivered as a powder, it can also be delivered as a spray. And it is said that this is the most lethal nerve agent that has been created. So this is the most dangerous of all the chemical weapons that has been created till date. There are other well-known nerve agents that are VX and sarin. So VX and sarin are two other examples of nerve agents, but this Novichok, which has been created by Russia, is the most dangerous of all the nerve agents. So let us see what else happens when a person is given Novichok. When a person is administered Novichok, there will be muscle spasms. So there will be a cramps, that there will be muscle spasms, and this can stop the heart. So the heart can stop functioning if a person is given Novichok. Similarly, there will be a lot of fluid buildup in the lungs. So there will be a lot of fluid that will be accumulated in the lungs, and that can also be deadly, and they damage the organs and the nerve cells. So administering Novichok creates muscle spasms, it results in the heart failure, there will be fluid buildup in the lungs, and it will also cause damage to other organs and nerve cells. Russia has produced various versions of Novichok. So there are some mild versions of Novichok, there are also several severe versions of Novichok. You can see here in this diagram what happens when a person is given Novichok. So on the brain it will have a serious impact. So it will first result in convulsions and the person will lose consciousness and will slip into coma. So the person who has been given Novichok will slip into coma. His eyes will be constricted. So there will be a shrinking of the pupils in his eyes. Then there will be a wheezing sound which is indicative of accumulation of liquid in his lungs. Then there will be a high heart rate. Initially the heart rate will increase significantly. Then the BP will also increase significantly. Later the heart rate will reduce and BP will also reduce. Then there will be nausea, vomiting and diarrhea. So digestive system will also be affected. then there will be profuse sweating. The skin will release a lot of sweat, and all these are symptoms of a person who has been given a nerve agent. So, if a person is given a nerve agent, these are the symptoms that are seen in that particular person. So, what is nerve agents, as I have told you, are examples of chemical weapons, but what is a chemical weapon? So, a chemical weapon is any chemical which is produced to cause injury or death to an individual. So, a chemical weapon is a chemical used to cause intentional death or harm through its toxic properties. Any chemical which is produced to cause death or injury to a person is called chemical weapon. Not just the chemical, the delivery systems which are using these chemicals are also classified as chemical weapons. So, any ammunition which is using a particular chemical is also classified as a chemical weapons. Are these legal? Definitely not. So, there are some examples of chemical weapons, blister agents. So, blister agents include phosgene, levisite, mustard gas, nitrogen mustard. All these were used extensively in the First World War. So, they were used extensively in the First World War, especially mustard gas, and this has resulted in as many as 1 lakh deaths. So, as many as 1 lakh people died in the First World War because of the blister agents. What happens when a blister agent is used? The blister agent causes severe burns on the body. So, there will be severe burns which will be created on the body. So, there will be painful, water filled, bubbles like structures which will be created on the skin. Then we have another class of chemical weapons which are called nerve agents. As I have already told you, nerve agents affect the nervous system, and these are the most dangerous of all the chemical weapons. Then we have the blood agents. The perfect example of a blood agent is cyanide. So, it inhibits the functionality of the blood to transport oxygen from one organ to another organ. Then we have the choking agents. Choking agents infect the respiratory system by accumulating fluid in the lungs. So, these include phosgene, phosgene, chloropicillin. So, these are examples of choking agents. So, all these are classified as chemical weapons. So, all these are classified as chemical weapons. So, there is a convention which is called the Chemical Weapons Convention. This convention prohibits the production. So, there will be prohibition of development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, retention, transfer or use of chemical weapons by state parties. So, whoever has signed the Chemical Weapons Convention is prohibited from producing, using, sale, export, stockpiling of chemical weapons. Those signatories are called state parties. There are more than 180 countries who have signed the Chemical Weapons Convention. So, this convention has created an organization called OPCW, that is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. This organization is responsible for monitoring the implementation of chemical weapons. Have countries destroyed their chemical weapons or not will be monitored by this organization, that is called OPCW, that is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. All state parties have agreed to chemically disarm by destroying any stockpiles of chemical weapons they may hold and any facilities which produce them, as well as any chemical weapons they abandoned on the territory of other states in the past. So, all state parties have agreed that they will not produce chemical weapons, they will destroy their existing chemical weapons, and they will also destroy the chemical weapons which they have planted in other countries in the past. This is also very important. State parties have also agreed to create a verification regime for certain toxic chemicals and their precursors which are listed in Schedule 1, 2 and 3. So, there are 3 schedules to the Chemical Weapon Convention which are called Schedule 1, 2 and 3. Schedule 1 includes chemical weapons which are highly dangerous. Schedule 2 includes chemical weapons which are dangerous. Schedule 3 includes chemicals which have large scale industrial applications. So, they can be used as chemical weapons, but they also have large scale industrial applications. So, every country which has chemical factories in that country must classify the chemical plants into these 3 categories: Schedule 1 plant, Schedule 2 plant and Schedule 3 plant, and they must open all these facilities for inspection by OPCW, that is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. A unique feature of the convention that is incorporated is called the challenge inspection. So, a unique feature of the convention is the incorporation of the challenge inspection, whereby any state party in doubt about another state party's compliance can request a surprise inspection. So, this is very, very important. This is one of the few treaties in the world which has a challenge inspection. So, if America believes that Russia has chemical weapons, they can challenge Russia, and OPCW can conduct surprise inspection of Russian chemical facilities. This is a very, very important feature. This feature is not available in any other convention. So, under the convention, the challenge inspection procedure, state parties have committed themselves to the principle of anytime, anywhere inspections with no right of refusal. So, they have to accept this principle of anytime, anywhere inspection with no right of refusal. So, this is about the Chemical Weapons Convention, a very, very important topic. As I have already told you, this convention has created the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which is located in The Hague, that is Netherlands. And the chemical industry of a particular country must classify the chemical industry into 3 schedules, that is Schedule 1, 2 and 3. So, Schedule 1 includes the most dangerous chemical weapons, Schedule 2 includes dangerous chemical weapons, Schedule 3 includes chemical weapons which have large scale industrial applications. So, this is about the Chemical Weapons Convention. So, thank you for listening and have a good day.